Good day. Today we're talking about a topic that without it humans cannot live. This is the topic of agriculture. Now, a few weeks ago, I watched a video from this guy. His name is Ken, I think Ken Lacote, and he hosts a YouTube channel with the name Elephants in the Room. On this particular day, they made a video titled "Why Did White Men Colonize the World?" I think something like that, or "Why did white men conquer the world?" Sometimes he frequently changes the topic or the thumbnail of his video that have already been posted. I think he does it to experiment how well people would see those videos and whatnot. In that video, he referenced a book, and this book particularly stated that the reason why Europeans conquered the world was because of something that happened in the Fertile Crescent at some point and the northern or southern Mediterranean, that is northern Africa. And this was particularly in regards to agriculture. However, he was a little bit, I would say, short-sighted in the sense that he only used that book as his major answer to the reason why people colonize the world. And that had a benefit. For example, he could go deeper into that particular school of thought, what the researcher said, but he also had a shortcoming, which was that he also ignored the works of other people. He claimed that those works didn't make any sense as to why people colonize the rest of the world. Now, personally, I feel one of the reasons why people colonized the world was, number one, the socioeconomic situation in Europe at the time was one that was troubling. The Black Deaths, the Crusades, and all of those other turmoil that took over Europe at the time. It caused people to want to emigrate to somewhere else. That's number one. Number two, the Crusade itself also gave the Europeans a kind of military personality. Previous to then, they were still military fighting each other, but not as hard as they were after the Crusades, because the Crusades made them to go farther than they had traveled before, traveling to the Middle East from as far as western Europe, and they had to travel down to Palestine to fight the Muslims to take over the Holy Land. And during those periods, they developed weapons, boats, and even the resilience to keep going, regardless of how far it was, as long as their king and their bishop had given them a blessing to go on. Now, he didn't mention this one. I don't know. He felt only agriculture and maybe the geographic landscape, for example. So he mentioned that something that was invented in China could easily be carried across to Europe because we are traveling around the same latitude. But he said, okay, Africa was just from up to down and the climate quickly changes, so it will be harder for you to travel. But then, number one, he's not an African. Number two, the book he read was not written by an African. So Africans have a different side of this story. For example, in West Africa, we would not say that we were completely cut off from Northern Africa throughout the time, even in the Sahara. And in fact, I wanted to make a video of this separately, but then I have to mention this in this video, actually, on those points. Even in the Sahara, you find evidence of human migration within the cave paintings, the rock arts of those regions. You find pictures of humans traveling the region on donkeys before camels came in. And before even donkeys were used, you find some of them that depicted cattle. We also use as pack animals to carry goods from Western Africa to Northern Africa. Now, if I want to mention this one, I want to go deeper into this, it might take the entirety of this video. But then the major problem I had with this video, or this perspective, was that he mentioned that most of the animals and crops were domesticated in the Middle East, and then it spread to Europe and then to the Americas. And then he claimed also that in this video that Africans and Native Americans and Aboriginal Australians didn't really domesticate anything. For Africans, he only gave Africans the credit of sorghum or millet. Millet, there are different brands and varieties of millet. For sorghum, in West Africa, also known as guinea corn. Now, he gave Africans the credit for domesticating that. However, he didn't realize that Africans domesticated more plants than just the sorghum. Even the cowpea, or the otherwise known as black eye beans, was also domesticated in Africa by Africans. In fact, in Africa, we also have many varieties of this black-eyed pea or cowpea, as you might know it in your region. In my own traditional society alone, we have at least two different kinds. Number one is a normal variety of the white, the brown. We also have the oloyin, the drum. In Nigeria, that the name is known as. In English, oloyin means honey. Or oyin in Yoruba means honey. So oloyin means tastes like honey. So this particular brand of cowpea tastes like honey. It's very sweet, and like you've added sugar to it naturally. There are different types, and then we still have the traditional, a cake kind of beans. In my language, traditional Yala or Idoma language, is called igrigri. I'll post a small video of it here so you see how it looks like. It looks very glossy, very hard shell, even with the beans itself. So before you cook it, it's more like navy beans with the way its shell look glossy. You have to first bake it or roast it in a pan before boiling it. The baking makes the skin to crack so that it will easily absorb water and then cook well. Now that's the different variety of beans. We can say, oh, this is a primitive one, but it was still domesticated by Africans and we bred out different varieties of beans from it. But because Europeans and Americans and Asians did not use it as much as they used wheat, does not mean that it was not domesticated. For example, in the domestication of crops in the Middle East, he mentioned primarily wheat. That was the only thing he mentioned out of substance. He also failed to realize that Africans also domesticated rice. Rice was domesticated in two different parts of the world, in Asia and Africa, particularly West Africa. And even in the time of slavery, the slave trade, many slaves taken from Africa were taken because they were good farmers. They knew how to manage crops, manage farms, manage farmlands, and they were very, very important, very, very crucial to the agricultural sector of the Americas, from the USA down to the tip of South America. Now, because he never knew about these things, he was ignorant, yet I know he tries to give you an opinion or maybe to comment if he has gone wrong in his video and all of that. But then it is also a thing of shame to hear someone claim that he did so much research, yet what he said doesn't even make any sense at all. Now, if you are familiar with history, you know of the term Columbian Exchange. Columbian Exchange was not just a term that referred to the movement of slaves from Africa to the Americas or diseases from Europe to the Americas. No. During the Columbian Exchange, we also had exchange of crops from Africa to the Americans and vice versa. For example, before the Columbian era, Africans cooked their own jollof rice, but they didn't use tomato like we use today. We used what we call snake gourd. It's more like a very slender watermelon, slender cucumber, and the flesh is kind of orangey, not so reddish like watermelon. And even in Yoruba language, you just call it tomato. Some people just don't know the real name, just call it tomato. But it's not a tomato because it's a gourd plant, not the particular berry like the tomato. So when you plant a single gourd of it, you harvest it and shave it, the clean inside, and then use that to prepare a stew, like how we prepare tomato stews today. And even before that, we also had garden eggs, which was also called maybe African tomato or black tomato or eggplant. But then it's different from the aubergine, the normal eggplant that the world knows. That one was domesticated in, I think, Iran or Persia, yes. But the garden egg was domesticated in Africa, Ethiopia down to West Africa. We even domesticated watermelon. And we even have different varieties of melons in Africa that are not like the particular melon that maybe when you boil it, it tastes like potato or yam. Our own different varieties of melon, when you boil them, they don't really taste like yam. Rather, we eat sometimes the seed. For example, the soup egusi is actually a melon soup. The seeds of the melon are harvested and then you dry them and grind them. They look very similar, this egusi, the melon, and the watermelon. But the egusi melon is much smaller and drier, doesn't have much water, and the seeds are much larger. So it shows that it's a primitive kind of watermelon. Even when you go down south to the Kalahari Desert, we also have melons that grows in the Kalahari Desert. They are also very similar to the egusi melon, and they are very rich in oil. I think vitamin E oil. So previously people used to harvest those oils from animals, but some farmers in Namibia began to harvest those oil from the melon to meet global demands. So I alone can't mention everything that was domesticated in Africa. I only know some that either I have personally farmed, because I grew up in both urban and rural Nigeria, so I farmed some crops, and some of them that my parents, whenever they go to the village, our hometown, they come back with those plants that seemed exotic to me. We have many of them: fruits, vegetables, plants, and even animals. We domesticated the guinea fowl, we domesticated the pigs, I don't know the I don't know much about the history or the origin of the pig, but we know that many continents have native pig population. And so it would be natural to if we found out that many continents domesticated pigs independently. Now, like I said, I cannot mention every single one of them, but the diverse climate gave way for domestication of different animals and plants. And even West Africa, if you go to somewhere like Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, or Senegal, we also have another plant we call fonio or acha rice, I think. This one, or also called pale rice or millet rice, is like rice but it's much smaller. So it's not really practically rice. And even many researchers have reported that in Senegal alone, there were more than 50 different species or varieties of rice. And some of them have been lost due to globalization of agriculture. So sometimes we buy so much rice from Asia and then the native varieties are neglected. That shows you that Africans were not just sitting passively and hunting animals. We also had a strong agricultural system, particularly in West Africa. East Africa also had their own agriculture, like Ethiopia and Eritrea, domesticated teff, which is not really eaten anywhere else in the world, only in that part of Africa. So again, an ignorant European will say because the Ethiopian domesticated teff and because I don't eat teff, therefore Africans didn't domesticate any plants. Like he even use the term zero. You say when it came to Africa, zero plants were domesticated. But then if you check history well, the truth actually is that many plants were not domesticated by Europeans. Most of the plants eaten by Europeans now are actually exotic plants that were gotten when they began exploring the world from Africans, from Native Americans, from Asians, from Polynesians, and from maybe Aboriginal Australia. I think so. So you see that most of what we eat today is actually from a global experience. We live in a global village now. Africans, let me say 2,000 years ago, if they were to eat jollof rice, they won't eat it with the exact same ingredients with which they eat them today. Even the peppers we consume nowadays, the chili peppers, the bell peppers, they're not native to Africa. Neither are they native to Europe or Asia. They are actually a domestication from Native Americans. And the point is that in this video, you didn't only attack Africans, you also mentioned the Americans, Native Americans. Said the only thing they domesticated was maize, corn. So he mentioned how hard it was to domesticate the corn and how the geography of the continents of North and South America made it hard for the corn to spread from south to north and to central, wherever. But then if you check well, cassava was also domesticated by the Native Americans, not by Africans. Although now it's heavily eaten by Africans and Asians, but it was actually domesticated in Native America. Cocoa, that the world is going crazy about now, eating chocolate, was actually domesticated by the Native Americans as well. Even the Maya and the Aztec pyramids, they picked different ceremonies that were dedicated to chocolate rather. Coffee also, like I said, was domesticated in Africa by the Ethiopians, Eritreans, and Somali before it was taken to Asia, to Turkey, and then to Europe. So you can see that there was actually a global economy. Many of the vegetables that we eat today was domesticated by the Americans, and some of the food crops we also eat came from Africa and Asia. So you can see the book he used in that particular video was very short-sighted, so he didn't know what he was saying, and I forgive him his sins. Now, I tried to compile a list of different plants that were domesticated in Africa or were taken to the Americas during the Columbian Exchange. Number one, here we have watermelon. We have ackee, which is mostly eaten in Jamaica. We have muskmelons and cantaloupes. We have tamarind, which is a popular ingredient in cuisines. We have baobab fruit, which is although more common in Africa. We have the African star apple, in Yoruba known as agbalumo, or udara in Igbo. And then we have kola nuts, which was used in making Coca-Cola in the past before it was moved to chemicals. We have shea nuts, which is used in making shea butter. And now most of the world use it because we export it to some countries and they use it in their cosmetics and their food as well. We have oil palm, which is now being used in Indonesia. It was domesticated in West Africa by my ancestors. We also had sesame seeds. In Nigeria, we know it as bene seed, but sesame. Some of you guys sprinkle it on your donut, but here we grind them into a paste and use it to make soup. Then we also have okras, we have eggplants, We have African yam. We have Ethiopian kale or gomen, a hardy leafy grain that predates the introduction of European cabbage. So the kind of cabbage, but it is to Africa. You have fluted pumpkin, which is known as ugu. Now, fluted pumpkin is very, very important. Many Nigerians cook with it. The leaves are used like spinach, and the pumpkin itself, when you open it, the seeds inside are boiled, and it tastes like walnuts. Then we have castor bean, which is used in making oil nowadays, and many others. I can't mention all of them. I'm sure also mention Bambara granules because Bambara granules are also were also grown by my ancestors. We call it ikpehi. I'll post a picture of it or a video of it here, so you see how it looks like. It looks a bit like peanuts. It has a shell. It grows under the ground, but actually beans. When you boil it, it tastes like granules. When you bake it, it tastes like groundnut as well. And sometimes we grind it and use to make a pudding, which is known as okpa, similar to moi moi. So you can see Africans actually had many other contributions that influenced the world. And even if they didn't influence the world, at least they made the life of Africans much better. Even the animals we had, cats, domesticated African wild cats, was first integrated into human society in ancient Egypt and the Near East. And don't forget Sudan as well. Sometimes we've mentioned so much about Egypt, we forget about ancient Sudan. We had African cattle as well. Even in my own village, we had a native cattle that's completely different from other cattle across the world. It's well adapted to the West African climate. This one, it depends on your climate. Some parts of the Sahel have taller cattle. In the southern part of West Africa, along the coast, we have shorter cattle that are very bulky and stronger, well adapted for the environment. The same way we also have our dogs. In the Sahel, the dogs are slender and taller. In the southern part of West Africa, the dogs are shorter and bulkier. Even the people self in West Africa, the Sahelians are slender and taller, while the people who are coastal like Igbos and Yorubas, you find many of them that are short and fat. But most of the Northerners and the Sahelians are slender and taller. So it's just a matter of structural adaptation. But then, it's important to know that Africans were not just hunting and gathering. We're also farming heavily. And then, while they were mostly eaten by Africans, they also made it to the Americas via the Columbian Exchange. However, many people are ignorant of this because of the fact that they know very little about Africa. That's number one. And number two, Africans, we didn't farm on a very large industrial scale for exports. We farm mostly for consumption. Yes, some of them were sold in the markets, but they were mostly aimed at consumption by the local people, the families, not owning hundreds and thousands of acres just to export them. Of course, mostly for the region. And although it may be a problem for modern day Africa because now most agriculturists are just subsistence farmers, not commercial agriculturists, and then many countries have been forced to rely on imports of food items. But things change and society is adapting. I won't say Africans were not farming commercially, but maybe it was they were not mostly about cash crop, mostly food crops, and then it was mostly about feeding the people. So it wasn't about farming unreasonably for someone else who was living across the world. So thank you, and I hope my video made some impact on your perspective on African agricultural perspective and science. And if you love my video, do well to subscribe and see you in my next video. Thank you.